important when you're creating these tutorials? What is kind of like stuff to keep in mind? So you remember that the tutorials you're doing for this class are going to be basically dependent on your creative power as well. But the best thing you probably can do is first do the tutorial as intended, or at least part of it, and then go in and change it based on what you want. For example, the model, I'm going to click on here and open it. As I said, it could be a completely different subject, a completely different character, but no matter what, you have to kind of have a subject in this tutorial in particular. So what is always important is if you decide, hey, look, I'm going to choose a different image. I'm going to, as I said, put a gorilla there instead, and I'm going to go find it somewhere. You might want to kind of look at file sizes. So one of the big thing in this tutorial, because we are customizing them and changing them, the file size that the tutorial tells you to use is actually something that might change because it might depend on the image you find. What I mean is, you would want to open the image that the tutorial wants you to use and go image size and say, okay, this is a 300 resolution, and let's go in inches. It is easier to remember. 11 by 17. So it's a tabloid about size image. So obviously, my guess for this tutorial is it ends up being about the size of this model, you know, the tabloid side. But let's say you say, okay, I want to use a gorilla. So let me go online right now. I'm going to go on Chrome, or actually let me go on Firefox. I use Firefox more because it has a little bit more privacy stuff on it. It means they don't track you as easier. You know, Baba, you gotta calm down now, man. Sorry for the cat. He's a little needy, but he's adorable. So let's say gorilla in there. I'm gonna, oh, you know what? I don't know if I can download it because I just realized that, wow, this is a great image. Great gorillas. I just realized I don't remember my login, but let's try with another one that I do remember my login. It should be in my computer. Let's go with free images. So what you need to do is you need to download an image that is going to replace that, you know, lady. So it's kind of important that you download an image that is, you know, comparably, you know, something you can size to be that. Sorry, I'm looking for something in which the gorilla is kind of centered, like in that photo. It's not spread out too much, you know what I mean? It's, yeah, Unsplash had better images, huh? Maybe this one. Maybe that's what I use. So I'm going to hit download. Let me see if it works. Uh-oh. There we are. So I downloaded my image. I'm going to say okay. And I'm going to go and dig it out of the downloads right now and see what's the size of that image, right? Are you guys seeing my screen still?
No.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. I wish I guess did not get the screen sharing kicked in. Thanks. You guys, if I'm talking and say, oh, look at the gorilla and stuff, the Unsplash was better, I'm assuming you're seeing it too, so just stop me and say, oh, you forgot to put the... So, we know the size of this image. It's 300 by 11 by 17 inches. Let's go and look at the size of the gorilla image I just downloaded on freeimages.com and do some comparison, obviously. There we are. I'm going to drag it onto Photoshop. So that's kind of the first step is whatever you decide to do, you will look at the tutorial. Then you will design your own interpretation of it. Again, changing the images. You can also change the size, by the way. It means we're not, you know, it's not that I say the requirement for this assignment is to have a 300 resolution by 11 by 17. I did not write that anywhere, right? All I wrote is use the techniques of this tutorial, but make your own creative, you know, interpretation of it. So that is the requirement. So you don't have to worry about, the size. You can decide, hey, look, let me go and see this image, what it is, because I really like it and I want to use this one. So it's 72 by 14 by 19. So it's kind of, obviously it's close to the size we need. Is close to the top model. It's not too far from that, right? In terms of inches. In terms of resolution, it's far, but I'm not too worried about it. By the way, I'm gonna take off the decimal. I'm gonna say, okay, I'm not too worried about it because I don't need this piece as a printed piece. I'm not making a big poster or anything. It's just an exercise of creativity and software technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, fine, I'm going to make my entire composition at 72 dpi, right? So what that means, though, is that when you open the other files of this tutorial, you might have to turn them into a 72 dpi image, right? Because you're going to eventually composite everything on top of your gorilla. That is what the tutorial does with the lady, right? What the tutorial does, it makes you create a gradient, background, bring, this image with the background masked out, and then bring all the other pieces and create some neat effects with it. So you would do the same thing, but you know now that your image size is going to be different. So you have to budget for that. That's why I said that these tutorials are not necessarily something that are intended to hold your hand through the process, but they're just the beginning of a process that is intended to make you a problem solver. And problem solver means you have to make these decisions. Say, okay, I found this image now that I'm going to use instead of the other one. So now I need to think about the whole process a little bit differently. And I can do that because I can problem solve this stuff. I know the software enough that I can navigate through figuring this thing out. Does it make sense? Are you guys with me still?
Yep.
All right, so how do I proceed with this, right? You can do the same thing that we did. So first of all, what we can do is, we know that this guy is going to be masked out. So when you go and say image size, you can make the overall canvas a little bit bigger, right? So first of all, I'm going to write down what's the size of the gorilla right now. And it is 14 by 19 at 72. That is fine. Now, you guys remember, let me tell you, earlier I hinted at something, but I did not explain it because I did explain in 182, but we talked about the fact that this is a recap or review of things. So do you remember the difference in resolution? Why 72 or why 300? Does anybody have a clue and can just courageously voice this? I know you are brave and you can do it. Because I know some people...
File size?
File size, Teddy, good point. The file size will be dramatically different. That is honestly why I prefer the 72 dpi at the 300. What else? Why does it matter? Brandon, do you have a wild guess?
Which Brandon?
Oh, you're right. I cannot believe I have two Brandons. I've never had two Brandons before. I feel fairly lucky. Yeah, I was talking to Brandon Schwartz because he's in the middle of the screen, as you guys can see, and you're on the perimeter. But either Brandon can answer. Whoever feels like I kind of know it. What's the difference between, why would you set up a file to be 72 dpi versus 300 dpi?
For print.
What do you say, Brandon?
300 dpi for print.
Right. So do you remember when we did that project in 182 that you had to create your own avatar? And there were two options. One was for mobile and one was for print. And it was very important that the mobile was 72. That was going to show up on a cell phone, and the print was 300 or 150. I forgot what was, because 150 is enough for print. So that's kind of the difference. Is oftentimes when you go for print, you need a higher amount of pixel per inch, and it's pretty straightforward. So I was explaining. I go back to this, that my gorilla is 14 inches by 19 inches, and I love squares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 20 by 20. So I'm going to say File, New. I'm going to create a brand new document. And by the way, I want to show you that. Do you remember when last class I said, you'll find tutorial that asks you to create an A4. And all the sizes that are A2, A1, A2, A3, and A4, they're actually European sizes. That's what I grew up with, by the way. I did not know what letter size was when I came to America at age 26. So, in fact, it was confusing because the name letter, it made me think about a written letter that I used to write a lot. But you can get, by the way, these sizes in obviously the software because the software is sold all over the world. But what you also can do right here, and by the way, I love millimeters, my home, yay. What you can also do is switch everything to inches and say, I want to make it 20 inches by 20 inches at 72 dpi. And RGB, do you remember the difference between RGB and CMYK? Red, green, and blue. That means our image, every color is basically the combination of mixing those three colors. I could choose CMYK right here, that is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. That also is a standard. Most people associated RGB to a screen mode, and CMYK is what they think they need for print. But now we have something called color management system that whatever you choose will create a conversion by the time it's sent to the printer. So even if you start in RGB, when you hit the print button, there is a middle, color space that, by the way, is called LAB, luminance, alpha, and beta, that does the work of converting everything so everything goes smoothly anyway. So I use always RGB because it's a larger color spectrum. It means you have more colors to kind of represent your work. So I always use RGB no matter what. So if someone tells you, oh, if you print, you have to use CMYK, tell them think again, or just, go Google color management system and how the whole thing works. Now, there are spectacular classes in color management system in GRC, and I took a few, by the way, and I encourage my students, the graphic design students, the art student, to always take one of those. Because even though we don't necessarily want to work in a print shop, it's really important you understand printing and colors when it boils down to printing. We also talk about color profiles a little bit in 182. I explained that every image you create at this point has a color profile. Even the images you create with the camera, right? When you shoot with a camera, that Canon camera or Epson camera has a color profile that gets attached to that image. So it's really important that you are aware of that too, because this color profile is crucial for printing, right? Like when you print, you want the printer to know, the printer and the image, those two color profiles needs to match somehow for the colors to turn out the same. I forgot to name it. I'm sorry. I'm going to call it with my name, _week 1 _ tutorial 1. Because you remember, I'm going to have a tutorial 2 as well. All right, cool. So I say create. So now I have my canvas ready to go, and I can do whatever I want. I can create that, layer, new fill layer, gradient that asked me last time. And I'm going to call it background. Remember the tutorial starts with that, right? And I'm going to say okay. And I'm going to go and pick whatever, color inspires me. I could obviously, prepare it. Let me go with something like neutrals. Let me look at neutrals. Actually, I'm terrible with colors. Means it takes me so long to pick colors. Is almost, I would say funny, but not very funny. So I'm going to pick something already there. So I'm not going to spend a lifetime on it. I apologize, but I am really picky with colors. I don't know. I've always been like that. I love colors so much, and so I keep tinkering with it. You know what I mean? I don't seem to be capable of settling for. In fact, right now I want to go and change it, but I'm going to hold myself from doing it. Okay, guys, because I like you a lot, and I don't want you to be watching me playing with colors the whole hour. I don't know. I've always been a big color kid, even when I was little. So now you have different options to bring images into this base, right? You remember, you can do Command A that selects the whole thing, Command copy, and go in here and do Command V. What's the problem with this? There's only one problem that is huge. That is, if I decide to shrink, I don't need to shrink this guy. So to be honest, this method would be fine. But if I decide to shrink it, if I do Command T and I say, oh, pay attention up here, okay? Look at the width and height. So I'm gonna, right now, this is, it says that I'm at 100%. But let's say I need to shrink it a little bit, like this, right? And then I hit, so I'm going at 48%. And then I'm gonna hit return. And then my client says, oh my God, it's really too small. You want it bigger. So I go back into Command T, but it completely forgot the 100%. It thinks that the 100% is this. So when I go back and try to make it bigger, it doesn't show it on Zoom, I'm sure. It doesn't show it that much because this guy is actually somehow doesn't show that much. But it can get pretty grainy. It means you're losing quality. So to avoid that, one way to go is instead to use smart objects, right? You notice this is the layers we did. How do you use smart object? You go and instead of doing the Command A, Command C, Command V, you go and do, I know my gorilla is singing opera. I don't even need it open. It could totally be closed. In fact, let's close it. Actually, before I close it, where did I put it? I need to make sure I have it. Oh, right there. Perfect. So if you can go and say File, place embedded or place linked. What's the difference between the two? Does anybody remember?
When you place linked, you have to have the file on your computer for it to open. But if you embed it, then it's part of the ESD file.
Yeah, the problem with that is not necessarily that. I think was it Ted that talked? Was it Teddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem, Teddy, is not necessarily that the file is on your computer. Is when you turn it to me, unless you turn the whole shebang, is going to get lost. So yeah, Teddy has a great valid point and knows exactly how linking works, obviously. That means when I go and say place link, what it does is instead of placing the image inside of this Photoshop file, it creates a path to my desktop, right? So imagine that after I'm all done, I say, oh great, I completely forgot that I linked it, and I turn it into Enrica without turning in this image. Obviously it's going to, be a broken link that hurts, right? It's sad when you did a fantastic job and spend, hours on something, you send it somewhere, and the first thing I see when I open it is broken link. So unless you have a million images and they're really big, you can go with place embedded that will make it that the image lives inside your file. So I'm going to go and say, okay, I'm going to, go to the desktop at this point because I know my gorilla is in there, and I say place. It'll show up with this X, right? This means it's a smart object, and I hit return, the X goes away. So now when I go and I do Command T and I shrink it down to 50%, it is, or 48, whatever it was, right here, you see that is 48%, and I hit return. And then the client says no, I want it bigger, and I do Command T again. Now when I do Command T, it knows it is 48%. It doesn't think is 100, right? So it's pretty cool. Means the beauty of Smart Object is that you don't really need to kind of like worry about degrading your image. It's encapsulated in this beautiful little vector box that protects it pretty much. So now, obviously, what I need to do next is what the rest of the tutorial tells me to do. That is, mask out the gorilla and bring all the other images. And I'm not worried about masking out the gorilla because you know how to do it, right? You go with a layer mask, or you first create a selection. I'm going to do something quick and dirty. We did it already in 182, so you might be sick of me doing it. So I'm going to actually go fast. So I'm going to go in here with just a regular, for now, magnetic lasso. And remember, there is a tutorial in week 1 that shows you how to refine edges and do a much better job than I'm doing right now. And obviously, I'm not going to be super precise because it takes time to do a great selection. I mean, I don't know you guys, but it takes me at least an hour. And for this gorilla with all the hair, it would take me longer. By the way, be smart about that too, right? I didn't pay much attention because my goal was to show you that you needed to resize images or think about the sizing. It wasn't about the mask. But whenever you go and pick images from freeimages.com or whatever stock photography site you decide to use, think about this too. Means if you pick a gorilla, it's going to have all those hair. It might be harder to mask it out. And in this tutorial, one of the longest, more difficult things to do is actually to mask out the model, because you'll see all the other images have a pretty solid background. So it's going to be really pretty easy to select, extrapolate the object. You can simply use a magic wand to do it. But let me go all around the gorilla really quickly, just so that we have something we can start from. We feel like we got our mask done. And then we talk about bringing in all the other images. Oops. Now, what I would do after I did this, I would obviously refine it, right? So hit Q and paint, all this stuff better. Go in there and, make it right. And so that's one option. As I said, the other option is to look at that refine edges technique that is in the video. But my point is, it'll take a little time here, no matter if you're painting it with refine edges or if you're painting it with the quick mask. It'll take a little time to go all around and fix it. Means take care of the hair. And you might not choose a gorilla, so I'm not going to do it even because I don't think it'll help that much, right? So I did my layer mask by clicking down here. You guys know that it hurts me to see the selection being so poor, but I'm going to try to hold back because, again, this is just showing you the technical side and not the beauty. So that's what you would do with the model or whatever image you pick. Then the other images, you need to bring them in, right? So let's go and open them and see if they're the right size. Because actually, in fact, let's not open them. One thing we could do, we could just do file, place, embed. But there's a little glitch here that is, if you go and open the image, let me go and open the image. Tutorial 1. Let me open the one of the flower that I think is the next one that it asked you to bring in. So if you go and look at how big it is, image size, it's going to be significantly bigger. So what I probably would do, bigger means if you also ignore this, and you just go in that image that I just masked the gorilla and just do file place, you'll obviously be able to place them, then scale them down. But your overall image is going to be much, much bigger later on, right? Because you brought in all these high resolution images that you don't need, right? Now, actually, I realized that Photoshop will convert. So let's actually not worry about it as much. That means when you bring the 300 into a 72, it will make the conversion. But sometimes what I like to do, I like to control it myself by going in and changing this to 72. And it looks like it's going to be a lot smaller. So I'm going to say, okay. And let's do file, save as. I generally don't like to change the originals because, I'm that way. I like to always be able to go back to the beginning. You remember the non-destructive editing that I always tell people? That means whatever you do in your Photoshop is really nice if you can go back to the beginning. So right now I can do file, place, embedded again. Or command, A, command copy, command paste. It really depends, whatever you want to do. I'm not forcing you to use smart objects. And that's it. So I brought it in. Now the problem is, you see, now it's a bit small there, right? So if I hit, let me actually make it a little bit bigger and see how it looks. I'm going to actually, because I need it pretty big. I need it about this size, I think. So I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to actually go into layers and put it behind the gorilla, right? There we are. We need it even a little bit bigger, right? So that when I reduced it to 72, it shrunk it pretty small. So another thing I might want to do is I might say, okay, what if instead I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to bring in file, place, embedded, the high quality one, the 300. Because I need to scale it so much bigger. So let's play with this instead. Same size, but oh yeah, it is there. But I have more resolution to start with. Another thing you can do is even better is, let me actually hit return and delete both. I'll show you what you can do that is always better. When you need to scale something much larger to avoid graininess, you can go back to the original, the flowers, file open. And because you have a lot of resolution, you can tangle with the resolution a little bit. What I mean is, if I go in image size, I taught that in 182. Remember this checkbox, right? That is, if I go here and I change it to 72, the size, actually, let me start over. I need to show something first. So the size is 6 by 7, or actually 7 by 8, roughly. If I have this checkbox checked and I type 72, you see the size stays the same. But I'm holding Option and Reset. If I uncheck this one and I type 72, now my 7 by 8 is 32 inches by 28 inches. It's pretty big. It's huge. I'm going to say OK. So if I bring this in without touching it, I actually would touch it, it's going to be, you know, humongous. In fact, I know my thing is 20 by 20, my gorilla. So it's going to be obviously potentially bigger. Not really, because Smart Object will going to make it fit in the screen. So we'll already scale it a little bit for you. So let's do File, Place, Embedded. I, by the way, use only Smart Objects. I don't use Command A, Command C, Command V. But it's because I'm a bit of a, you know, stickler about having the maximum quality possible for everything. Oh, I forgot to save it. Shoot. Did I? Yeah, I forgot to save it. Sorry. Oops. I think I forgot to save it. Did I? Because it didn't bring it in bigger. Or actually, it might do the same. Sorry, let me remove the controllers again. That just popped back in. I'm just realizing I don't know if I saved it. Let me try to save it. And let me make sure that whatever I did is still there. Yeah. Okay, Command S. I'm going to close it. Oh, another option is, I know all these files are actually still, for mysterious reason, locked. And so that's another possibility, is that it does not allow me to change that file. In order to change files that have permission issues, like they're locked, what you need to do is actually save as a copy, not a save as, or open and change it doesn't work. But let's, at this point, just bring Place Embedded. You get the picture. That is, you go in the file that you want to bring in, and you can resize this by unchecking that box, and then do a save as a copy. Don't do what I did, that I forgot to do it, and bring it in. There it is. Now, actually, because I hadn't saved it, that's the way it's supposed to be. Do you remember I told you that it would be as big as my canvas? In fact, it's bigger, but because it's a Smart Object, the Smart Object scales it to be as big as my canvas. So as you can see now, the flower is a much better quality than if I had left it, you know, what it was. I'm going to actually rotate it a little bit, because I think that my gorilla would like it. And I'm going to make it a tiny bit bigger in both directions. That's cool. All right, maybe it's too big. Let me actually go a little bit smaller. But you get the picture. What you need to do is, whatever you decide to do your creative tutorial, your composition, you might have to go in there and finagle with the stuff that is provided by the tutorial. Some of those tutorials don't have anything provided, so in that case, you're free to do whatever you want. But the one that have files that you can use, you need to go and tweak those files to fit the size you need. Another thing I want to tell you, one last piece of information, because you're probably tired of my congested voice. Whenever it's time to change the colors, you obviously have ways to do it. For example, if you want this flower to be like not this color, something different, you remember we learned how to do an image adjustment, hue, and saturation. Now, if you do this, though, you're permanently changing the colors, right? So if you go and tweak the hue, that is what allows you to make the color different, and then you say OK, it will be done permanently. That is a bummer, because you will add more stuff into this file, and later on you might realize, oh, I actually don't like the flower now to be that color. So it's always better to use adjustment layers, right? So right here, you can do the same thing. You can add the hue adjustment layers that will go above the flowers. And you will, basically say, okay, I'm going to go in. You can see that this opened up and change the hue to be more, I love it, bright pink, for example. And that's cool, because then let's say you are done, you do other stuff, but then you want to bring it up again. You just go in and click this layer, and all of a sudden is everything there again to change it however you want to change it. If you want a purple or green or pink or whatever. So adjustment layers are also amazing, and it can be turned off if the client says, I don't like it. Now, there's a little glitch here. You guys can see that the problem is it's affecting also the background, because everything below here gets affected. So how can you solve that? I'm going to actually delete this adjustment layer because I'm going to show you how to solve that. If you want it to affect only the flower, you need to make sure that you have, sorry, I should have dragged the whole thing. So you need to make sure the flower is selected before you do the adjustment layer. And remember, there's a great shortcut that I adore, or key trick that I adore, and I don't even know how you can do it through the top menu in Photoshop. You command click on the thumbnail of the layer, and now it loads it as a selection. Now you can add your hue and saturation right there. And now it applies only to that flower. So when I go in and say I want it to be pink, you see the background doesn't change, just the flower gets pink. By the way, you also can increase the saturation. Once you change the color, you want it overly saturated, you want a really bright pink because you like that it matches the mouth of the gorilla, you can do that. And at any given moment, you can decide you turn it off and go back to the beginning if you want to. That's the beauty of adjustment layers, just like masks. You can edit them at any moment, right? I know we did this in 182, but it's kind of nice to repeat it. So now the next step with the tutorial is do all the pieces, that are, to be done. By the way, you can also move these a little bit. Say, actually, I think this should be here, and this one should be a little bit, oops. What am I clicking on? Now remember, if you have auto select, it will select the top element that is on the layer stack. So I need to look at my layer stack. Yeah, it was selecting just the adjustment layer instead of selecting both. By the way, you could link these two, and then whenever you want to move them, oh, no, sorry, it linked the wrong thing, it looked like. So if I want to, did it link the two? Sorry, one sec. Oh yeah, it did. Sorry, for some reason I didn't see the little links here. I was looking at these one instead, these two. They are very similar, as you can see, but they got linked. So now when I go in, I try to move it, it moves it together. It doesn't move just one. Earlier, what it was doing is it was moving the adjustment layers because it was on top instead of moving both. So anyway, so now obviously you need to go and bring in all the other pieces. And you can decide if you want to place embedded without worrying about resizing it to be bigger or smaller. Let's bring in the deer now. Remember, one other element you have to bring in is the deer. And it's really small, so I probably would actually say escape. I guess it's actually escape is acting on the zoom controller instead of acting on the Photoshop. So what I would probably do is I would actually go and open deer and do what I did with the flower. So I'm going to do that one more time, and then I'm going to promise I'm going to be turning the my crazy voice off. So you would want to go in image size, right? Or like we did with the flower. You would want to uncheck the resample here. Is a 5 by 7.5, but if I go down to 72 dpi, it becomes 12 by 18. That is a lot better. And I'm going to say OK, Command S. This time I'm going to even remember to save it. Big progress, right, compared to the prior time. And then I'm going to go back. I can totally close this. In fact, it's kind of a good idea when you close it because then you have to save it. Earlier I did not close the flowers. So now when I say File, Place, Embedded, and I choose the deer, right here, and I say Place, should be bigger. There it is. I'm going to say Return. And I forgot where in that tutorial the deer goes. It's all above the shoulder of the model. So obviously, if you're deciding to do this composition, it might be, what you might want to do is you might want to move the gorilla to the corner somehow. I mean, I don't know if you want to use, what you want to use, probably not a gorilla, I know. But I'm just saying that you'll have to kind of think about where everything goes, but you generally do that at the beginning of the process, not at the end. I'm going to move this behind here. And obviously I need to move my flowers to go with the gorilla. There we are. And now I can make this guy maybe a bit smaller and mask it. So that is, so I'm going to do Command T. Ultimately, I thought I needed it bigger, but I don't. There we are. Let's make it like this. And let's actually rotate it a little bit too. So anyway, I'm just kind of finagling with it, being creative. The idea with these tutorials actually is that I want you to be creative. So now how do I select the deer? Now you can try many ways. I think let's try the magic wand, since this color is pretty, it catches that, and I can hold the shift key and trying to catch the rest. You know what I mean? You can try with the magic wand and see how far you go. All I want to catch, by the way, is the deer and the red flowers. I don't want to catch the rest. That's just for fun, so I don't spend a long time selecting. That would be the right thing to do. Oh, actually, let me deselect and check contiguous, so that, let me see if it does. Yeah, it does a better job. Contiguous was unchecked, so it had a bunch of holes in the inside. It still does, right? You can see this. Does not select the highlights. It is a problem. But if you hit Q and paint, right? You remember you go with the brush tool and say, okay, this actually needs to be included. In fact, let me do something smarter here. Let me make sure my quick mask is not blue, because everything is fairly blue in my composition. So I'm going to say I want it to be bright green. So okay, so now it's easier to see, right? So then you go in and with the brush tool, oh, I just realized this is a smart object. You would want to do that inside the smart object. Sorry. If this was not a smart object, was a command copy and command paste, it was actually fine to do what I was doing. But actually being a smart object, you would want to do in the smart object. So just for a matter of being fast, instead of having to go into the, remember a smart object, you have to double click on here and it loads as a separate file. I mean, you can finagle to get it done in here, but what I want to do right now is just to wrap it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the shift and make sure I'm adding to the selection, hold shift and select the red stuff as well, and see if I get, you know, close enough to what I want for now, since again, this is just a technical demo. It's not about doing the final piece. Sorry, I'm looking at what's happening here, if I got enough or if I need to get a little bit more. So anyway, this is just kind of to show you a little bit the steps, not have it obviously perfect. It's pretty close though, not bad. Okay, so obviously I'm gonna go in there and create a mask. Yeah, not exactly the way, I mean, a lot of this rose got chopped off, but you get the picture. You basically go in and bring in the images you want, and then mask what you need, and then add that text. In this case, I would add it on this side instead of on top of the model, and et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of get the picture of what's important to do. That is, try to look at the composition, basically, that the tutorial leads you to do. And you can obviously quickly do the whole tutorial first, and then sketch an alternative in which it has maybe most of the image, but some stuff is changed. Maybe in this tutorial, it would be easier to keep the model and change the flower to be a different flower. You know what I mean? My point is, you can change whatever. It doesn't have to be the primary element. But the idea is that you change something to show that you gave it a little thought and you made it yours. So that's kind of what the tutorial is. What I wanted you to keep in mind every time you do the tutorial is that whenever you use different images, you need to budget for that. You know, think about this image sizing and what ultimately you want your composition to be. So you kind of do what every designer does, that is planning. When you come up with ideas, you plan. You come up with, okay, what do I want to represent? I obviously sketch as well. I don't know if you're a big drawer like me, but it's really important that you kind of think about, you know, all the pieces, and then you size your images, assemble them, and then obviously go in and do the fancier stuff, like, you know, the thing around her eye with the vector, and then add the lines in the back. That is all provided. The images are, all of the images for this are provided. That is kind of nice. That is why I started there. I'm going to stop the recording and take questions.